So there are 3 pillars to any given business, and if each of those pillars is activated to the right capacity, to maximum capacity, you've got maximum scale, right? So if you can do each of these things well, you've actually got a business that scales as a flywheel.
Amrit, welcome to the podcast.
Brother Fine, it's such a pleasure to be here, and just so nice to, even just before the podcast, be sharing such great laughs with you. Touch wood.
That was so funny. I was actually, to give you guys context, we were supposed to reschedule, and I was testing the camera, and I said test 1 2, and I hear an Australian accent saying test 1 2. And I was like, what the fuck just happened? Okay, so let's just Amrit, the first impression that I get of you is that you seem really to radiate positivity and joy. I want to ask you, was it always the case?
Touch wood. Thank you so much for that kind reflection. Unfortunately, no, not always the case. I've got a bit of a history actually with a past. It's been a long time now. Because I've been doing the path of the Inspired Evolution for about 8 years, and even personal development for some years before that. But prior to that, I struggled with like 6 years of depression, and that was a really, really dark time of my life. And actually, the tools that I learned from there actually informed so much of, the coach and the podcaster and everything I've become now. Because I remember I used to say this a lot, which is depression is one of those things, unless you've gone through it, you don't really wish it upon your worst enemy either. Like it's a dense place to be. It's a heavy place to be. It's difficult. And I think one of the things that people don't pick up on is it's like, the fish in water doesn't really know that it's swimming in water as well. So you don't really know that something's even wrong, but you just know that nothing's really right. So that was a really tough period of my life. Thankfully behind me now, thanks to a lot of what I've learned along the way. And then I also struggled with, even with the tools that came from there. A lot of mindfulness, a lot of meditation, a lot of self-awareness. But then even then I ended up in this space around 7 years of career misalignment, where I was just really, just completely doing the wrong thing for my personality type and makeup. Let's just touch on, trying to make it as 3D as possible. So I was completely out of alignment in my purpose. And if you want to get open about it, which I know the kind of spaces your show loves going into, I firmly believe we all have a soul and it has a calling. There's a reason we're here, and for me, the personality is an avatar that is here to facilitate the lessons of the soul, and I was just sticking it into the wrong place. Now I look back and I don't even demonize any of that. That was all necessary for me to do, 360 pivot and shift to becoming podcaster, coach, speaker, that I now thankfully, touch wood, get to spend my time doing. But it came from hitting rock bottom and then rebounding back up, which is that, it's that age old adage of breaking down to breaking through. So I'm conscious I've given you the Cliff Notes version, but there's so much in there that we can unpack. It's definitely not been always rosy, and even day to day, I think the Amrit that people pick up on is the Amrit that's podcasting, or the Amrit that's coaching, or the Amrit that's public speaking, and people see me in my element. The book I'm writing is called Meta Flow. That's me in flow, touch wood, doing what I love. And when you do what you love, you show up your best self. You can't help but show up your best self, right? Because you're loving what you do. This podcast, I've seen you on your podcast, you radiate joy, you're beaming happiness. It's always such a pleasure to watch you as well. And so, but I'm sure you have your days where you're like, oh man, today I don't feel like the rich life. Today, and then some days where it's like, shit, I don't feel like I don't feel like Mr. Inspired Evolution today, but one foot in front of the other. So it's interesting. I think that's also an important message to communicate, because I think oftentimes we see people online and we see them, living a certain way, and we can be quick to idolize them. But then obviously, they're also human, living their own lives, doing the best that they can. But the key thing in there, my whole life's work at the moment is now dedicated to helping people align their personality to their soul's calling, because that's where you find the most joy. And that's where you find the most radiance, and that's where you actually enjoy life the most. And life actually, it's not necessarily easy. You still have challenges, like the podcast you're running, not easy, yeah? good challenge, but you like those challenges. You know, it's like, actually, this is satisfying. There's a sense of fulfillment there, which is very hard to quantify or even explain how satisfying that really is. But when you start leaning into it, it really is everything.
I love your journey. That's the first thing that comes to mind. I wanna really go deep into how you had a recent episode with Sahara Rose, right?
Yeah.
And she also went through a similar journey where she was also lost and she pursued her dharma, right? And I want to kind of figure out, what did you learn from aligning with your soul's purpose from her?
Okay. So, in fact, the episode with Sahara was very affirming. A lot of what I believe, she carries a similar thread of wisdom. She's been through her own journey and chart and course to sort of get to where she's at, and I've gone through what seems to be like a parallel journey. Not to say I'm Sahara Rose, touch wood, I'm just me. But yeah, for me, feeling into her journey and just how much of other people's expectations are, like the similarities are not limited to, but include like other people's expectations, other people's rules and programs for you. And I guess also share like a rebellious kind of spirit in some ways, you know, like this spirit of like forging our own path. And I don't think we're alone in that. I think this generation that we're a part of is also, and I think maybe every generation is kind of bucking the previous generation to some degree. Yeah, but there's a lot of reverence for ancient wisdom as well. So we both carry this awareness around, actually, there is a soul, there is a bigger purpose. And I love how for her, discovering the points where we differ a little bit, which is not really a difference, but it's a difference in modality. For her, understanding your soul's purpose is to align to your dosha and your dosha type, and understanding your Ayurvedic dosha type, and whether you're earth and wind.
Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, when you say dosha, because I have no clue what that means.
Yeah, cool, awesome. Thanks for clarifying. So in Ayurveda, so we have Ayurveda, which is the science from which yoga has emerged, or like the sister science of yoga, depending on how you want to articulate it. Okay. And it's really interesting because the message in my heart, which is hopefully why I'm here to share today, is that health is purpose and purpose is health. Yeah, after 8 years of podcasting, this is what I've learned, that like, you know, what is it here that you really want to share? Wisdom is health. Health is purpose and purpose is health. And that's that piece of wisdom, which is central to everything that drives me. Right. And I thought for the longest time that I was the only person that was sort of carrying this. You know, sometimes you feel like you're alone in the world, champion pushing a rock up the hill like Atlas. Because, and you know, it was interesting because I was out of alignment for career for like 7 years, also aware that I believed this, you know, so I believe that your health is your purpose and your purpose is your health. And I felt that I was off purpose. And just what that was doing to my mental health and myself, oh man, it was a heavy place to be. But that to sort of say, actually, when you zoom out, I started researching more and more around this, I found that the whole science of Ayurveda actually exists to facilitate your dharma, right? So, and your dharma is your purpose. And Ayurveda is the science of health and wellness, right? Like a 2,000, 5,000 ancient science of health and wellness, you know, from what we now call India, right? But there was around the Indus Valley and this part of the world. And so that's Ayurveda, and that's Dharma. And so Dharma is your soul's calling. It's like everybody here is for a specific person. So calibrate your health so you can live the mission that your soul was put here to do, right? And if you're not living in alignment, Mother Nature will call those cells back into, like, it's like, hey, give me those cells back. You know, like you're not honoring the sacred gift that is the life that's been given to you. Like, you know, there's a reclamation, you know, and this is, you know, it's a bit intense to look at it that way, but nonetheless, that's the health purpose conversation, right? Versus also, it's like, hey, if you're feeling stressed out, stress is a free life coach in your system. Like, it's recalibrating you back into alignment. Those 7 years that I was struggling, I told you, like, it was a necessary pivot. If it didn't feel as hard as it did, I wouldn't have sharp turned, you know. So that was necessary. So that to say, that's Ayurveda, that's Dharma. Within Ayurveda, one of the key fundamental places to start is understanding self-awareness and your makeup. So it's almost like you do personality tools online, which is, Like you can do the Myers-Briggs, or you can do the Enneagram, or you can do the Big Five personality test. This is your dosha. It's like your makeup. So in Chinese medicine, they have wood, steel, wind. So in the Indian culture, you have wind and water, you have earth, and you have fire. Yeah, so you have vata, you have pitta, and you have kapha. And so based on that, you have a different type of constitution. And based on that constitution, your body behaves a certain way, your thinking is a certain way, you're made for certain types of thinking, you're made for certain types of tasks, you're not suited to other things. Ultimately, the idea is to try and be balanced. Yeah, but everybody has natural propensities based on where they lean into. So those are the doshas, and she leans in pretty hard on, Sahara Rose leans in pretty hard on the doshas to sort of understand, hey, this is your makeup, and so these are the kind of characteristics that your life would naturally exhibit as your strengths, and this is what you could go and do. Yeah. For myself, with a background in engineering, I'm quite left brain logical, but also like I'm Indian by heritage. My father, I've been, I don't say groomed into spirituality, but as growing up Indian, your spirituality is just the operating system. Like metaphysics is what we believe is primordial. Like the whole thing is Maya. Like everything's an illusion to some degree, right? Touch wood. And you're having those conversations as a 3-year-old, 4-year-old. So there's the engineer and the spiritual. So for me, it's always very practical spirituality, and it sounds very 3D, but your values are the tools that I use, right? Like understanding your values. And I like your values, like your 3 core values, because you're not just being pigeonholed into 3 different doshas, even though that is true. Like you have 3 different doshas in makeup, but my values are like connection, contribution, and celebration. And the way I came up with them, well, anybody can run the exercise, inspiredevolution.com/values. 20 minutes from now, you'll be as clear as I am on your values. It's a gift free to anybody that wants to check it out. Or amrit.coach/values. If you go through, get your values, you might have freedom, adventure, joy. You might have, and you can have any myriad of any words. Like the combinations are actually as many words as are available out there, and you won't end up picking, no 2 people would likely pick the same words. Yeah, it'd have to be a very big sample size for people to come back with the same answer, which I really like, because we are all snowflakes. We are all fingerprints. Like no 2 of us is superfluous to the grand design of everything, Flood. Like there's yourself, there's myself. The universe is doing this trippy thing where it's looking in on itself, folded in on itself, trying to peer in and experience itself, and from as many reference data points, unique reference data points as possible. So it's already created an Amrit. It's already created a file. It doesn't need to create another Amrit, right? It's already created an Amrit. And once it's created an Amrit, like I had this existential crisis. You look at your kids, they're you 2.0, right? Like you're already on the way out, right? And so it's always evolving. It's always inspired. And so in there, it's like these data points exist. And so to understand the way in which my soul, which is the universe in many ways, Touchwood, wants to peer in on itself, you can actually check in with your values and kind of go, what are the things that I personally value? Like what inspires me? Inspired evolution, work your way towards what you value. I value connection, I value contribution, I value celebration. Sometimes you don't know what you like, but you can take a look around at like the people that you admire, because they're your inspirations. So someone might look at Fuad and see strengths, yeah? And someone might see kindness. Now, are you kind or are you strong? Yeah? Now, if I see strengths, it's because I value strengths. So strength must actually live within me to be able to see it within you, right? So this is the exercise I run people through. There's a lot more to it, but in 20 minutes and people get crystal clear on like, these are my 3 core values. And the way I describe it is the pillars, your values are the pillars of the temple that is you. So they're the pillars of your personality, because everybody I've interviewed now, the spiritual teachers, most of them are saying like a very similar thing. You can change the words, lower self, higher self, ego, spirit, personality and soul, I think works really well. People seem to understand those without too much baggage, so that's why I use personality and soul. And Gary Zukav uses those terms in Seed of the Soul, and it's very clean, his teaching. I like it. So I've been using personality and soul a lot more and more recently. I used to use ego and spirit a lot because I was coached by Eckhart Tolle for the longest time. So that just made the most sense to myself. But yeah, And so when you've got the pillars of the temple that is you, these are the pillars of your personality, right? And oftentimes what happens is our values get hijacked. Society's telling us you value this, value that, consume this, consume that. Don't be on your center. Don't understand your own values. Can you please value this so you can consume more of this, consume a bit more of that? You know, they hijack you. Right? Whether it's intentional or unintentional, your family hijacks you, but with the best of intentions. My mom and dad wanted me to be an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer, otherwise I'd be a failure, right? Now they love what I do, right? But back then they were like, what are you doing? Like radio, like what are you talking about? Like radio, like what? You what? And I was like, look, it brings me joy. And they're like, we sent you to a good school. And I'm just like, this is a good outcome. It's just like, no, they couldn't, you know, it was just so difficult for them to get on board. Why? And so like they were like intentionally going out of the way, like you need to value this. That's what they were raised with. That was their value set. Yeah. And if we don't question our value set, what ends up happening is we end up living into the values of all of those around us, never really understanding who we are. And my biggest fear is regret. Right? You get to the end of this one life that your ego is a part of, let's say, you will get reincarnated, touch wood, but your ego is a part of it. And so it goes, oh, there's all this stuff I want to experience this lifetime as this personality. These were the pillars of who I really was. I didn't get to experience any of that. I got to come back and do all those lessons again. And it's like, well, let's try and figure out who we are, what your personality is here to do. And as you start to decode that, it gets really clear. It's like, seems like this is what my soul has passion for, right? And what you start to do is you create, and I start to visualize a bit like a camera. We were talking about cameras before, but this is how the aperture opens up to let the perfect amount of light in, right? So you like align to your values, and now this soul life force energy pours through into your being through and through with the greatest amount of ease, right? And that flow, well, that's the name of the book I'm writing. It's called Meta Flow from that sort of higher state, touch wood. And yeah, that's the alignment. So for Sahara's work, it's all about understanding your doshas and coming into alignment with them. For myself, it's your values, understanding your values, and then living, deciding everything based on your values. Like I coach, podcast, and speak. As you can imagine, coaching is a really deep connection, one-on-one. Contribution, I'm contributing to people's lives, hopefully. They will attest to that. Celebration, hopefully they're living life fuller, richer because of it. This podcast, I get to connect with you. I get to connect with you, the listener, the audience that's tuning in, right? There's hopefully a contribution to your life, right? Touch wood, hopefully, you know, knowing a little bit about me, or, you know, Fuad here leaves an impact on your life for the better. And celebration, hopefully it leaves an impact for the life for the better, right? Like hopefully you live life more fully. Speaking, the same, lots of connection, lots of contribution, right? Rooms full of 16,000 people, lots of celebration, right? Like it's full, touch wood. So that to say, now I create my life in alignment to my values, and this goes back to what we said at the beginning of the podcast. You end up in more pockets of joy, right? Which is your divine birthright, but we kind of get taken off our center. The opportunities there is for us to discover our values, come back into alignment with them, and then live in alignment to our values.
Wow. I've been through a similar journey for the past year. I was also career misaligned. I had opened this agency on social media on how to create viral content and stuff, and did it for a year. It made money. Then one day I just stand in front of the office desk, and I'm like, I wrote big goals down, and I look at them and I'm like, this doesn't energize me. This doesn't make me happy. This is not what I want to do. And so I remember the time when I did a podcast with a friend in the UK, and the energy, the joy that I felt, which I know you can attest to because you also feel it when you're talking and you're in that state. And I was like, maybe this is where I should lean into, you know? And so I started this podcast, and I had the same thing as you, Amrit. My parents also questioned everything I did. You quit a business that was making good money to start a podcast that's making nothing, where you're just going to talk to people on the internet. And it's like,
it costs you money. Exactly.
Exactly. Actually, this is what happened. I actually took everything that I had saved up, invested it in 3 cams, in the lighting, in the mic, and my parents were just looking at me like, you know, and it felt like the right decision for me. because these conversations and getting to know your story and your wisdom is so fulfilling.
Touch wood. Yeah, and I think there's and I think everybody has. And it'd be really interesting to know what your value sets are, right? Because oftentimes, I'm sure connection is probably high up there as one of your values, if not, contribution or something that, and that's how we meet the people that we get along with so well, right? And the tasks that we're engaged in. So for me, like, conscious conversation is everything because it gives me an opportunity to connect and contribute, right? And so my values are lubricated by this medium of conscious conversation. And that's where, and I'm sure for you, like, connection might be one of your values. I'm just a little bit cautious to say that because obviously I see the whole world through the lens of connection because that's that's the avatar, like that's me living into my avatar. But I'm sure you've got that in there, and then in there, that's then conversation for yourself obviously lubricates more and more of the values that you hold, and you just come more and more alive in around those values. You feel more joyous, you feel more open, and actually it becomes one of the things, especially because we're leaning into like a bit of an entrepreneurial conversation. That I think, I do talks on resilience and how they pin back to values. Like in the podcast, like in your business, there was a point where you were like looking at your goals and you're like, oh my god. Like you were looking at goals, which are meant to be inspiring, and you went, oh, and you tapped out, right? With a podcast, I can probably argue you probably don't even have goals right now. You might.
It's true.
You might not even have goals right now. But you're like, you know what? Fuck outcomes. I'm into the process. Dude, what? Like, you're just attached to the process. And so if you get attached to the process, like, I've been doing my podcast almost 8 years coming up soon, right? 8. Whoa. If you told me, like, oh, if I set the goal, do this podcast for 10 years, if you sort of, like, run this business for 10 years, it's like, 10 years, whoa. Like, exactly. It was like, But there was no goals to be set. It was like, hey, I just enjoy this. And so you are resilient. You enjoy the process. You've got a passion for it. Resilience makes it sound like you have to put up with something as well. So, no, bro, this is my mental health strategy. This keeps me energized. Like, this is what life's about for me. Like, if I didn't get to do, my wife actually, touch wood, this is really insightful, but I probably shouldn't share this, but we, after we had our first kid, like, we have a really healthy dynamic, touch wood, me and my wife, but nonetheless, I asked her the question. I framed it this way. It's not like she has to let me do anything, but and she would probably be the one that'd be like, don't say that, like, let you do stuff. She always calls me out on when I say the like, linguistically say things the wrong way. But she goes, I said to her, I was like, hey, how come you let me podcast even right after we just had a kid? Like, there was so much going on, lots of late nights, and, still the podcast, 2 podcasts a week coming out, and it's all just happening. And she was like, first of all, let you, shut up, don't use that language, like, I love you. But the key thing in there was, touchwood, was, hey, I want you, like, I know you. And if you weren't doing that twice a week, you're not really the you that you can be. And I remember tuning in just going, shit, but that puts an extra toll on you because you've got to look after the kids, for those extra, like, my podcasts go for like 2 hours, so 4 hours a week. Doesn't sound like a lot, but for those that have a newborn, 4 hours, like, you might go a couple of days without a shower sometimes in those early stages, right? Like, it's intense. And so 4 hours. And so in that space, it was like, it was such a nice reflection to sort of realize actually other people see it too, right? Like, the Fouad that was trying to run the business, and probably doing quite well at it, was a different kind of Fouad that showed up to the type of Fouad that's running the podcast. And, like, that ripple effects into the rest of your life. Like, yes, your parents are going to care and they're going to be like, hey, how's this going to work for you financially? And they're looking from root chakra stability, and absolutely they should, because they care about you and they want you to be able to survive in the world and stand on your own 2 feet. But ultimately, I'm not trying to, encourage everybody to be frivolous, but at the same time, like, that, your joy is your responsibility. It's up to you. And if you're lucky, touchwood, you might have a couple of people around you that support that and kind of go, hey, actually, you're a better person around when you're doing the things that you love. Go do more of that, please. Because I actually love the person that enjoys themselves that much because they're nice to be around. And it's true. We all feel that. People love tuning into your podcast because you love doing your podcast.
Yeah, it's so interesting how you put it. The difference in how you are depending on what you do. Like, if you're doing something you don't like, you don't have the same energy, the same vibrance, the same life force within you, right? That vibrates. You can see it. And when you're doing something that you don't like or that's not meant for you, you can see it slowly starting to drain you. And you start burning out more and more and more, because this is what you said before. It's kind of like your compass to realign you with your doshas, your dharma, and all the rest. So it's so interesting how you have an internal meter, which is your energy and your joy and what gives you that, which lets you kind of pinpoint what is the thing you really want to do. Now I'm going to be fully honest with you. This podcast brings me a lot of joy doing it, but on a financial standpoint, it's not making any money. So it has been a contributor to, I would say, a kind of dark night of the soul, where I just questioned everything, and I was like, I just took a leap of faith. I followed my intuition. I like doing it, but on a financial standpoint, like I went kind of broke because of it, to be honest. And so I know you had a conversation with Matt Khan, and I want to ask you your opinion on this situation. Have you ever gone through it, or yeah?
So it's interesting, because when I took a leap, I not too dissimilar to you, quick cold turkey, and it was quite jarring for the nervous system. And now, like, when I look at health and wellness, I boil everything at the moment where I'm at in my journey. I boil everything when it comes to health and wellness back to the nervous system. Even just, like, everyone's like sleep is fundamental. It's because it maintains your nervous. Anyway, I can get down onto the nervous system conversation. It's a whole other one. But the key thing in there is, when you abruptly make a massive shift, it is a massive adjustment that you're going through. And something like a podcast, let's get really clear here. Like, if you don't mind, I'll just spend a moment just doing some really tight coaching. I'll try and keep it super succinct. So most people come to a podcast, and people used to ask this all the time, does the podcast make you money? And initially I was in a similar position too. I was like, I got into podcasting. I know there are podcasters out there making money, but mine was costing me money for the longest time. And in there, for those that are tuning in that, maybe podcasting isn't the specific niche that you're in, so just to make this conversation relevant for you, if you're in the position for then monkey roping is the metaphor. You need to monkey rope, ideally, and not turn the corner super hard and jump off the ledge, right, like we did. So what you're meant to do is continue doing what you're doing to a degree and grab the next thing. So grab your podcast, continue running your business, and then you get to a point where it's like, you can see escape velocity, and then you kind of go, all right, I'm a jump. And then you hold on to the podcast, and the podcast becomes your trajectory, right? That's the smooth way of doing it. But everybody goes, that's so well structured and thought out. Good job, engineer. But the soul also doesn't work that way sometimes. You've got to break the fuck down to break through, right? So sometimes you just have to hit rock bottom to be able to move through, right? So I've seen lots of different transformations, worked with like 360 people one-on-one on these one-to-one coaching journeys, right? So I understand the different nuances now, having just witnessed so many different transformations. Sometimes I can espouse that to you to monkey rope, but then you still have this innate desire of like, no, I need to quit cold turkey, and you're going to have to do it because your soul's calling is like, I need to eat like cement. Like, I really need to go through the hard stuff because I'm ready for this transformation on a real deep guttural level. And this is the slower path and the easier path for your nervous system. This path is much more accelerated and much more jarring for your nervous system, right? Both work. It's just how you want to go about it. So that, to sort of bring it back to podcasting now. So for yourself to recognize that actually to any key business, there are 3 pillars. And most people have different terminologies for this, but when it came to business, I found business advice very, like, it felt very, I don't want to say fuddy-duddy, but it felt really out there, and I couldn't really let it in. I don't know why, I didn't feel really accessible. So I had to go away and try and find some ways to really make it really applicable and accessible to me. So follow along for just a second. I'll sort of explain kind of how it lives in mainstream business advice as well. So there are 3 pillars to any given business. And if each of those pillars is activated to the right capacity to maximum capacity, you've got maximum scale, right? So if you can do each of these things well, you've actually got a business that scales as a flywheel, right? The first thing your business needs to do is to be able to attract people. You got to attract, yeah? So you draw people in. Every business does that. Apple does that. SpaceX does that. Tesla does that. All different types of businesses do that, right? Your local food grocer does that by putting out fruit trays, right? So attract is critical, yeah? The other thing your business has to do is to be able to convert. So people are attracted, but then there's going to be a cash register, right? That actually takes them and converts it, right? So you've got to be able to convert people. There's going to be someone standing at the cash register, right? Someone is attracted to all the fruit, rocks up to the cash register. There might be a cash register. There's no one to check them out. They can't buy, right? So you've got to be able to convert, right? So attract and convert, yeah? And then the third pillar is deliver, right? So you've got to be able to deliver. You've either got a product or a service, right? You've got something that you've got to give. Yeah. Now, we can talk about the dynamic around all of these because we all know people that can attract really well and can convert really well, but don't really have much to deliver. These are those snake oil salesmen you see online, right? Great copy, great marketing ads, not really a great product of substance. And those people, it's okay because the market always self-corrects, right? Touch wood, they can't scale because they have no meaningful product. They don't have leverage. So they can't pull the lever and go cha-ching again. Right? Not that it's all about money, but it's like that's correcting them into like, hey, you need to get more integral about what you're providing to the market. The market has a really good way about it. Yeah. For those people that can sell really well and also like, you know, convert really well and then also like have a product or a service, but still don't have like any revenue coming in, it's because they don't have an audience. Right? So they need to attract better. Yeah. And then you've got some people like myself. For the longest time, I built a podcast. I was very like attracting a lot of people to my thoughts, my ideas, touch wood. Yeah. And I had a product which was like coaching, which is like, hey, I really like helping people shift and transform their lives from one place to the next, in alignment to their soul's calling, touch wood. But I had no idea around how to convert people from like, hey, I've got a podcast and I've got, you know, this coaching. And I didn't even know that this was like how it all interplayed together. So that to sort of say, your podcast is a tool for attraction. Right? I wish I knew this when I started out. I was 5 years in before I started understand. Like I was like, why is my podcast like it's costing me so much money and I'm falling flat on my face. Like somebody help. Yeah, and I had to sort of pick myself up by my own bootstraps. And this is what I came to learn. I was like, your podcast, Amrit, and it's hidden in the word. So just to sort of zoom out for a sec and get out of Amrit's model of business, attract is just marketing. Attract is marketing. But when someone says to me, I've got a marketing problem, I've got no idea what they're talking about. I'm like, what are you talking about? Marketing problem. What does marketing mean? But if someone goes, I've got a problem attracting people to my business, I'm like, oh, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Let's think about how we attract people to Fort. Okay, cool. That's for me seems workable as a, like now I understand the problem. I can provide a solution, right? Convert is how do I convert people is basically sales. People say, I've got a sales problem. To me, I used to think sales and marketing would like actually lived in, like I've got a sales problem because I can't attract people. It's just not true. Sales is just how well you convert. It's your systems. Right? So that's sales. That's a sales problem. And a product or a service, like I said, is what you deliver. So delivery is, I've just got to serve something, product or service, right? It's delivery. So these are the old school terms, and I don't want to call them old school. Those are what the mainstream kind of calls them, marketing, sales, and delivery. So I'm not reinventing anything, but I'm just reinventing the terms a little bit because it makes it a little bit easier for us to access that wisdom, right? It's like attract, convert, and deliver. Now, hidden in the phrase podcasting, you will hear everybody say to you, your content marketing. Your content marketing. Have you heard that phrase? You're aware you're content marketing? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what is content marketing? Content marketing is the slowest, snail's pace form of organic marketing. You're basically taking your time to build the slowest gradual relationship with your clientele and your community and your audience. And in fact, I would say you're not even building clientele, you're just building a community. You give so much to your community that at some point they're just like, hey man, I've gotten so much from all the free stuff you put out in the world. I'd love to just, can you put something out so I can just reimburse you for all your time and energy that you've put in? right? It's super organic. I like it because it comes from a place of service. But winding back, it's called content marketing. It's your podcast. It's called content marketing. It's your podcast. If I think about a big organization, does Microsoft's marketing make them money or cost them money?
Make them.
No, it costs them money. No. They invest money in marketing. Right? So they run ads, they spend money on ads, they run a podcast. Well, they don't run podcasts, but these are the kind of things that they run, and those are like an expense on your books, on your business books. It's an expense. Yeah. So marketing is meant to be an expense. So your podcast is meant to cost you money. Right? So once you come to terms with that, it's like, oh, okay. So if it's meant to cost me money, I'm meant to be building something for this community and converting them into something. How do I serve these people further? Right? So is it like, hey, what do I podcast on? Am I meant to be a coach? For some people, I didn't know that this was happening. My first few, in the first couple of years of podcasting, my first few listeners came out and said, hey, will you coach me? And I just happened to be like, I'd love to be a coach. I just never thought I was a coach. And I just sort of became a coach, and I became certified, and it just started to happen. I just loved it. And the better I podcasted, the better coaching I became. Now, I'm conscious not every podcaster is meant to be a coach. Yeah, but it just worked for me. That's what I became. But for many podcasters, it's like, hey, having a community, right? You might have a community. It's $27 a month, and there's 100 people in there, and that might be enough to make bills meet for the moment, And it's just like the sort of conversations you're having in the podcast, you catch up with the community and they're having a mastermind around it. People are sharing posts. $27 a month is not much. Yeah. But that's you delivering a service. It's like people want to connect more than just the one-way conversation. It's like, okay, cool. Like that's my service to my community, right? To the people that I've attracted, I can convert and I can serve them better. Right? And that from the authentic place is like, how can you create the best service for these people? The more you think about them and put yourself in their pain point, you create more in alignment, right? So that then goes, oh, I must create something to deliver. I can see how we all get blindsided because it feels like we're delivering value in our podcast, and we are, right? But it's marketing. You got to realize that it's called content marketing. So it's not going to make you money, not for ages, right? Eventually your podcast will get to a point where people want to sponsor it, or there'll be ads on it or whatever. And there's enough to sort of help you live off of that, touch wood. But even that is a treacherous place to be, because if the ads turn off or whatever happens for any reason, touch wood, God forbid, then, you're leveraged out. And if you're sending your kids to school based on the income that you're getting, is like all of a sudden, and then so what? You're going to build a really robust system around your podcast. And the key thing around there is understanding these principles: attract, convert, and deliver, and that it's attraction and it's meant to cost you money. And so it's like, what actually makes money in and around this ecosystem? And that was a tough lesson to learn. And, I had to go through all sorts of stuff because my podcast is a spiritual podcast. And so for me, one of my values being contribution was kind of been a saving grace because I'm service oriented. It's like, how can I serve? And so I quickly realized, as not quick enough, but 5 years in, I started to go, oh, okay, if I can be trusted with money, because the more money I make from the podcast and my coaching, I actually spend all that money and put it back into the editing and up level the editing, which then gives the podcast more polish, which reaches more people. And I'm not greedy about it. I'm actually reinvesting most of it back into the business, and a little bit of it can support me. That's fantastic. So that was a real healing journey to go on in and around money, touch wood, to some degree as well, because I think many of us in the spiritual space have this fear that money corrupts people as well, which isn't the case. So it just amplifies more of who you are, and it's actually, it's important to get really clear on your monetization strategy, because you can actually, if you've got, an extra couple of $1,000 coming in a month, and you can pour 1,000 of that into your editing, or having an editor, or, somebody else that can actually support you and stuff, you can research guests better, you can spend more time reading, you can have an even more impactful conversation. You actually read an entire book and you get into it and say, these few paragraphs are very interesting and you go to the podcast, you open them up. Now you've got time and space to do that because you weren't editing last week's episode, right? Now you're creating more and more value the way that you like to, touch wood. So hopefully that answers your question. I could talk about this forever.
Yeah, that was such a valuable answer, because I feel like this is what I went through. I was like delusioned by the fact, okay, I'm going to jump into a podcast. It's going to work really well. I'm going to make money off ads. Everything will go perfect. And nothing went to plan. And I had to hit the cement to realize a lot of spiritual lessons also, not only financial. I realized spiritually that I had a lot of pride, which was blocking me from learning. I realized that there was a lot of lack of humbleness, which also was blocking my growth. There was so many things that this cement drop, whilst doing what I love, taught me and helped me grow about myself. And I journaled about it. I learned. I realized there was a lot of lack of worthiness. And so there was a lot of this kind of dark night of the soul, and I really want to jump into it, talking about Matt Khan. Really helped the light shine even brighter inside.
It refines.
So it refines it.
Yeah. And so
I want to ask you: have you ever gone through a dark night of the soul? And if so, how does Matt Khan's wisdom resonated with you?
Yeah, so both of those journeys that I explained at the beginning of the podcast, which I gave you just the cliff notes, probably didn't come across as a dark night of soul because I gave you just the cliff notes. But 6 years of depression, harrowing, touch wood, and then the career misalignment. Like for me in particular, because I was carrying that piece of like wisdom is the wisdom of like health is purpose, purpose is health, touch wood. That was really difficult, man. That was really, really heavy. And so for me, those were the dark nights of the soul. Now, interestingly, the tools that came to me, and this is like, leading into the Matt space, like in previous lifetimes, maybe people just had one, and I'm still quite young, had two, touch wood. And I'm sure, and I'm not the only one, like I've interviewed lots of people and they're saying like everything's accelerating, consciousness, the expansion, everything is accelerating, right? This year in particular, 2024 is called the quickening. There is so much more of energy rising right now, touch wood, they say. So that to say, there is massive shifts at play. More and more people are going through more and more of these lessons, and what the wisdom there being that actually it's the hero's journey ultimately, right? If you peel it back, you're going through the hero's journey. Yeah, and the hero goes out on this adventure not knowing where he's going to go, and then faces a dragon, and then he slays the dragon, he finds the tools within him, finds his sword and slays the dragon, and then comes back to his community. He has to come home. The same person come home, and you mentioned humble. It's like, yeah, he's going to be humble. He's just like, okay, I'm back home. You think about the hobbits, they come back to the Shire and they just got to sit in the pub and drink mead. They slayed dragons, they hung out with dwarves, met the elves and all this sort of stuff. And they're back in the Shire just hanging out, drinking ale, and it's like, you just got to chop wood, carry water. You come back to that, but you've got the story, you've got the lessons. You're in the same place doing the same thing once more, but you aren't the same, right? That age-old, the same person doesn't step into the same river twice, yeah? The river's changing and the person's changing, but you're consistently in this, like in many ways, in the same space doing the same thing, but everything, all the dynamics are evolving. So in there to say, the wisdom that is afforded from understanding the dark night of the soul, and I used to ask some pretty trippy questions about this, and I'll give you those questions as well in a moment, was you kind of bring yourself to the awareness that breaking down to breaking through is one of the tried and tested methods to evolve. It just is, yeah. And the part of you that evolves is called the dark night of the soul. Is the part of you that evolves as a soul. And in fact, it's not actually the dark night of your soul. Your soul doesn't ever darken. It's a dark night of your ego. It's your ego that gets blistered and bubbles and just gets smashed and banged up. And usually, it's your soul that's pulling it back into alignment. It's like, come on. And your brain and your ego is just like, no, I don't know, fear, trust, rah, 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 all the things. And your soul's like, come on, you are infinite. Shut the fuck up. Yeah. And it's just like, and the ego just has a real tough time. And the more you cling, the harder it feels. But it's a necessary part of it. Now, the trippy-dippy questions just that Amrit would ask is like, now knowing this, every time I face a challenge, I have the awareness that, oh, okay, yes, I'm going through it, but also zooming out for just a moment with a meditative practice, yummy, what am I going to learn? You know, like you get there after doing the work, you know, a bit. And then some part of you then goes, oh, but am I robbing myself of the lesson? Is that an escape? You know, so, and then I spoke to one of the teachers on the podcast, and was it Matt or was it Marianne? I can't remember. One of them said, you don't need to make your life harder than it is. And I was like, thank you. I needed to hear that. I really needed to hear that. So, you know, you apply all the tools you have at any given moment to help yourself chart and navigate to the best of your ability what comes up. But yeah, absolutely, we go through these challenges, but it's also quite empowering to, and it's not just me imparting this awareness to you. I'm hoping people that are tuning in, you can reflect back and go, yeah, I've been through some challenges. And if you look back, those are the things that built your character. That's the shoulders on what you stand today, you know? And so you know that innately with yourself. I'm not telling you something you don't already know, but I'm inviting you to honor it on a whole nother level, right? Like those things forged you. Don't get too attached to your stories, because that is also, you know, living in the past can invite in depression. Living in the future is anxiety provoking. Be present, but know that, you know, in the present moment, there is someone with a lot of strength, a lot of resilience, a lot of stamina because of a lot of the things that they've gone through, and they're capable, and you totally are capable. And that's the big lesson, you know, your soul is inviting you to do more and more of what you were put here to do. Touch wood. And if we continue to hold ourselves in places that we're not meant to be, challenges arise.
You pointed out the mindfulness part, and for me, man, I used to go through so much anxiety when I was 16, 17, insecurity, these deep feelings of self-hate. And then a friend of mine, we got into reading together, and he's like, okay, read this book. My grandma offered it to me before she passed away, and the book was actually The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I read, and Amrit, I read that book. And I was reading, and I was like, what's that feeling I'm feeling inside? I've never felt that before. The feeling of peace, finally peace. You know, after so many years of suffering, I felt a glimpse of peace. So you've been certified by Eckhart, and I want to see how did he impact you?
Yeah, it was really trippy because, oh man, I'm so glad, yeah, it found you at the right time. I think everybody I speak to at the Power Now just has so much love for it. But similar to you, it's not basically, it's gospel to me. Touch wood. So the interesting thing about coaching with Eckhart Tolle is he was facilitating the certification to become a presence and purpose coach. And for me, I've always been, hey, your health is your purpose is your health. Even before I had a podcast and I was aware of all this sort of purpose. But I'm here and I'm like, no, Eckhart, whoa. I was almost like trying to call him out. You know, in my mind, it was like, whoa, bro, no. You're Mr. Now. Like, your presence, don't worry about purpose. Like, we can't talk about purpose. Purpose is in the future. Stop. What are we doing here? Like, my brain couldn't reconcile it. And so it was really actually one of the most, it was profound to be working with him in that space, not least of all because of the present stuff as you experienced from the Power Now, but also getting the transmission, like working online, but you know, like in very intimate settings. It was incredible, right? But there were some challenges because oftentimes the invitation that Eckhart makes to just be still and be present, he encourages you to invite others to teach and do the same. And absolutely, you can. But you'd be foolish to ignore the fact that there's a lot of context, whether it's energetic or spiritual or whatever you want to call it, walking around within Eckhart Tolle. And for you to just walk into it, because I don't know if you've seen him live, but you walk into an auditorium with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people, And he just starts to emerge on stage, like gently, and the audience just goes into silence, yeah? And you're just like, okay, this is what this is. And he sits down, doesn't talk for like minutes. He's just sitting there in presence, and you're like, oh yeah, we're just embracing the now. And he'll land, we'll all land in it together. And then I can't really imagine myself walking out onto a stage and not saying anything for multiple minutes, you know? Like, I walk out on stage and I do my talks and I'm like, welcome. Hey there, guys. How are you going? It's Amrit, you know, touch wood. And it's important, you know, like we're all different. But that to recognize, like, yeah, it was a very interesting journey because I had to learn what I could learn and then also learn to honor who I was as well in and around there as well. And the best teachers I find, like Eckhart, don't try to make you into them. Yeah, they're just like trying to encourage you to find who you are and also honor the lessons and the teachings and the wisdom. So that was really cool. And then the other piece was the purpose piece. And I can talk to you about that a lot if you want to go into that, because that was like, like for me, that really opened up like a lot of different things. Did you want to talk? We've kind of been talking about it today already. Yeah, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah.
So the purpose piece was interesting because Eckhart would say, and this actually informs a big part of the basis of Metaflow, the book that I've basically put together. It's now with the editor. Is he would say we have an inner purpose and an outer purpose. And I was like, this is fascinating. And so the way I liken it now, and if you guys can follow along, and this is the metaphor that's underpinning the book, is imagine a big tidal wave. Yeah, like a massive tidal wave. You know that Japanese painting of like the massive tidal wave? Consider that the outer purpose of life itself. Yeah, so there's this massive, life has its own purpose. There's a reason life is lifing. It's the question everyone's asked since eons. What is the purpose of life? And no one's been able to answer it. Maybe one day someone will, but right now, you and I will stay humble. Touch wood. Probably won't be us. Yeah. So, you know, let's see. Touch wood. So for there, it's, you know, what is the purpose of life? That's that big wave of life. In and around there, each individual has their own inner purpose. And if you follow along with the metaphor, the inner purpose, each individual within life is life expressing itself. We are the little water molecules, the little water droplets that make up that wave. Yeah? And so that's inner purpose and outer purpose. Now, each molecule needs to be able to live into its fullest potential for the wave to live into its fullest potential. And so for him, discerning whether you were on purpose or not came down to three things. Yeah? How did you know that if the water molecule, if you're following along with my metaphor, and the wave were structurally doing the dance together in the most integral way, with integrity, right? That's an engineering term that's sort of present in this field right now. Yeah? Is three things. First one is acceptance. Can you accept where you are? Right? So if you can just accept where you are, because so many of us are trying to be somewhere we're not. This comes back to your values. My position in the wave might be sitting on the back of the wave looking out at the sunset and just being like, man, like just rusted chilling, yeah? Just bobbing on the back of the waves, no need to surf, just taking in the sunset, enjoying the vibes, yeah? Someone else's place in the wave might be right in the tube, surfing it, grinding it, kind of going, man, this water molecule is like, woo! Yeah, like doing, and someone else's water molecule place is at the tip of the wave, like that sort of circular part, it's like right at the tip. Now the challenge is society's telling us all to be at the very tip. And so everybody thinks they need a nice red car, a big house, like, you know, this many kids, this much that, retirement fund, this, that, all this sort of stuff. And it's like, is that you or is that the tip of the wave? And are you meant to be at the tip of the wave? And how much are you stressing yourself out to try and be that person? You're going against your inner purpose. The outer purpose has already created that person, and now it's pitching it back to you that you need to be that person, but you're meant to be out here rasta chilling. Yeah? So acceptance is the key first ingredient. Can you accept your place in the wave? Right? And just trust that's what's for me. And there's that Sufi wisdom, which I love, which is that what's for me will never miss me. And what was never mine will never come to me anyway. Touch wood. Right? So there you go. Like, acceptance is the first key tool. The second tool is joy. We've been talking about this all podcast, right? Like when you find your joy, your inner purpose and the outer purpose are aligned. You can't fake your joy. I'll keep this like between you and I and everybody else listening. But when I used to go out on dates with girls like early days in high school, I used to always like try to make them laugh. Yeah, because I didn't have much else going for me. Kidding. But I used to try and make them laugh, right? And the key thing in there was, as long as I could make them laugh and we laughed about the same things in the same way, I could tell that we'd be getting along or we wouldn't be getting along, right? And certain times I'd go out on a date and I couldn't, like the other person just didn't get my sense of humor. And I was like, oh, this is kind of pointless because you can't fake what you find funny. Yeah, so your joy is authentically you. You can't fake your joy. Yeah? And so your inner purpose, outer purpose, like your values light up in joy. Like when you're doing what you're doing, you're enjoying it, you're enjoy, like it's enjoy. So enjoy, and that's when your inner and outer are aligned. So that's when you know you're on purpose. And if you're not in joy, maybe you're not in the right place. And it's very difficult to accept where you are. Maybe you're not in the right place. Yeah, there's an invitation to recalibrate. Yeah, this is what I love coaching people through. The third piece is enthusiasm. There are certain things that, and joy and enthusiasm sound similar, but like the podcast may not be bringing, like you enjoy when you're doing the podcast, but outside of this, there's a lot of editing, setting up cameras, booking guests, admin, follow up. That's not joyous, potentially.
Yeah,
might not be, right? But you've got enthusiasm for it.
Yeah.
That's the difference, right? It's like, oh, I show up, right? And I love the word enthusiasm. It's my favorite word in the English vocab. It's to infuse spirit into, but it also means to like be enthused, like to be overjoyed, full of vitality. I love the word enthusiasm. The more ways you unpack it, the more in love I fall with it, right? And so those are the three key diagnostics to understand whether you're in alignment or out of alignment, right? And it's really potent, really powerful to understand that. And so that was the purpose piece from Eckhart Tolle that helped me understand. And the way I could start to articulate it was in the wave model. So I started to put together the wave model. And what I found is that when I was in alignment, the key way to understand alignment is also your values. Like I feel it's easy to accept life when I'm living in alignment to my values. It's a bit more grippy. Like I can actually grip. So just a bit more first principles than joy, acceptance, and enthusiasm is I have enthusiasm for the things that I value. I feel joyous when I'm doing things that I value. Yeah, so, and I can accept things that I really value. Like there's more acceptance around there, right? I'm accepted more when I'm showing up in my values, and like people think I'm more joyous. So again, your values are like that first principle place where you can just like recalibrate it. Yeah, and so that's where you also feel just part of the pun with the wave metaphor, the most flow. Yeah, like you actually feel flow, and that's meta flow. That's the book, you know, and that's Eckhart's teaching.
That's amazing. I'm so excited to see it, to actually read it when it comes out. I think it's so cool.
But it's I've shared it with you for the most part. Yeah,
because you've interviewed so many people, 8 years of podcasting, plus there's also your life experience, plus there's the coaching of Eckhart, plus there's the Mind Valley experience. There's so much wisdom that's put into one book, and for me, when someone asks me, when I recommend a book that I really like, for example, Read the Power of Now, the first question is, how many pages is it? And I'm like, bro, that's you know, ask me how many decades of experience, not how many pages.
Yeah.
You know, and once you get into reading, you understand how much value it brings to your life, and you're like, that's a no-brainer to read, you know? It's a no-brainer. And it's so fun. I know it's confusing, boring at the start, but once you get into it, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. I think there's so much to be said for reading. And just so many, like, you get mentored, I was going to say for free. When you consider, you know, like people charge a lot of money for mentoring. A book is, you know, $30 of wisdom, and it can take you so many places. And I think one of the traps we also fall into, and I had to correct this a couple of years ago thanks to some of the guests that came on the podcast, was, especially in the personal development space, we fall into the non-fiction trap. But fiction is also full of wisdom. You know, imagination, you know, is super powerful as well. And yeah, there's a lot to be said for the great stories and what they can teach us. Yeah.
That's amazing. Amrit, I'm so grateful for all that you've shared and the enthusiasm, which is not only your favorite word, but also an embodiment of who you are. I appreciate you, and I want to leave you the space to promote anything you're excited about.
Touch wood. Thank you so much for that. Look, for me, honestly, if people tuning into this, you're inspired to live in line to your values, that's my service, touch wood to the world. Please, it's completely free. Come along, inspiredevolution.com/values or amrit.coach/values. They both take you to the same place. 20-minute masterclass. You'll be as clear on your values as I am on mine. For me, you listen to this episode for 60 minutes, another 20 minutes, and you'll have something practical, actionable, takeaway. Hopefully there's plenty of good stuff in here, but that actually, the rubber hits the road. You do the exercise, you get your values. It changes your life. Like, you make life decisions. You know, Mind Valley, you mentioned when they came to me, they're like, hey, we want to build a coaching program. Are you in? Like, it took me like, do I get to connect to people? Yes. Do I get to contribute? Yes. Do I get to celebrate? Yes. Will they celebrate? Yes. Will there be contribution onwards from them? Yes. So, yes, it took me like 30 seconds, and they're like, you don't want to discuss financials or terms and stuff like that. And I was like, foolishly, no. Like, I know this will be work out. This is in alignment to me. I'm in. And they were like, shit, okay, let's go. You know, and it was like a life-changing career decision, which is huge for most people that take weeks to think about. I remember the old me was taking ages to think about it, and like denied and fretted. I was like, no, this is in alignment to my values. Arguments with people, I don't argue anymore like as much. It's just like, hey, these are your values, these are my values, you're right and I'm right. You're coming from a place of freedom, I'm coming from a place of connection. From that perspective, yes. From my perspective, no. You're right. I can't argue with you. I honor you. Maybe you can honor me. If not, all good, I honor me. Let's go, you know? So it's so valuable on so many different dimensions. What you value in life, what you should go pursue, what you shouldn't go pursue. So yeah, highly recommend that. If you guys are into it, obviously you're loving this podcast, hopefully on YouTube, leave Fouad a comment, a like, and obviously guys, please do subscribe to Fouad's podcast as well, because man, a lot of love goes into these podcasts. I know, because I've got one, and I don't think people, it's hard to promote your own podcast, but yeah, I've gotten comfortable with it now, having run it for 8 years. So yeah, if you guys want to come check out mine, it's on YouTube as well. Amrit Sandhu, the Inspired Evolution podcast. Come over, hit subscribe. I do 2 episodes a week. But yeah, man, honestly, Fouad, like, I really dig the vibes that you bring into your podcast, man. Not just this episode with me, but like, you got so many great ones out there. And just, it's always fun, always authentic, like really, really authentic, bro. And I really dig the way you're doing it. And thank you so much for your questions, your time, but like, wanting to have me on really means a lot, bro. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Really, really a lot of respect and love for what you're doing.
Amrit, I appreciate it so much. The energy you bring is just unmatched. Like, this is one of my favorite podcasts till now. I've done 35 and the energy is unmatched. For everyone watching, I just want to thank you for investing your time in your spiritual development and your spiritual journey. And we'll be coming back next week. And yeah, thank you for tuning in the Rich Insight podcast.